Om Sthapakaya cha dharmasya sarvadharmaswarupine avatara varishtaya Ramakrishnaya te namah Sudhismriti purananam alayam karunalayam namami bhagavat padam shankaram lokashankaram. So we are continuing the discussion on this very interesting subject, Mahavakya. Now, it's very interesting when you read some of these commentaries, Shankaracharya's commentaries, you find he uses some very wonderful and frequently very humorous metaphors and analogies to drive home a very solid philosophical point. So give an example. This is an argument, some non-Advaitic, non-dualistic philosophers put forward some objections criticizing Advaita. According to Advaita philosophy, our true reality is that we are Atman, we are Brahman, and it is, the Satchidananda, it is existence bliss, knowledge bliss, it is absolute knowledge, absolute bliss, and absolute existence. So if you can put existence, knowledge, and bliss in its most sublime transcendental dimension, it is Brahman. It is not a definition, it is only an attempt to define Tadastha Lakshana. It's a remote, indirect way of explaining or defining something which is actually beyond explanation and definition. So, our true nature is that we are eternal bliss, eternal knowledge, eternal existence. And Vivekananda's definition, Swami Vivekananda defines religion as the manifestation of divinity already in man, already present in all of us. So, we are, by our true nature, we are divine. We are the most sublime, we are the most blissful, we are the highest dimension of reality. We are omnipresent in our true sense, not the physical body, not this mind-body complex, but within all of us there is that divinity, the divine spark, which is omnipresent, which is transcendental reality. This is the simple Vedanta. You can find in a pre-Shankarite work, which I discussed elaborately in many classes. I held a number of classes on this subject. Mandukya Karika is Gaudapada Karika. Na nirodho, na chotpatti, na bandho, na chasatakaka, na mumukshur, na vai muktaha itesha paramatha. A very high, very sublime truth is proclaimed in this verse. What it says is, really, there is no dissolution, no origin, no bondage, no liberation, neither spiritual disciplines nor spiritual seeker, because we are, even without understanding, without being aware of it, we are Brahman. So the fact that we are Brahman is not a result of any activity, it's our true nature. This is the highest truth in Vedanta. Now, when another philosopher listens to this, he raises one very interesting objection. So, we are already Brahman, we are already Atman, we are already perfect. Then why should we read all these books? Where's the need to pray? Where's the need to practice self-restraint, discerning wisdom between real and unreal? Sadhana sadhushta sambhati we call it, Why should we develop an urge for spiritual enlightenment? No need of it, we are already that. And then, Vedanta says, Sarvam Kalidam Brahma, everything is Brahman, we are the Brahman. Then, so there is no problem. Then what's the use of all these philosophical discussions? We can go and sleep. This argument put forward by an interesting philosopher who tries to oppose Shankaracharya. The statement comes in the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad Bhashya. The commentary says, Parasya adukhitte Anyasya cha dukkinaha abhave dukkopashamanaya shastra arambha anarthakyam iti chet. Anarthakyam means totally useless, being used. I mean, absence of any practical utility or any practical value. So, if you accept that Atman is adukhi, means Atman has no dukkha, Atman is perfect, Atman is eternal bliss, then, and there is nobody worried about it, there is no need of anyone going to a temple or a church and pray, because we are already the divine spirit, the divine spark is within all of us. So absolutely no problem, no need to pray, no need to read holy books, or no need to meditate, nothing of the kind. So, parasya adukhitte anyasya cha dukkinaha. Apart from us, there is nothing else in this world, only everything is Brahman. Everything is a manifestation of Brahman. And Brahman is eternal bliss, and that's our true nature. Then absolutely no problem. There is no need of any discussion of scriptures. Shastra arambha anarthakya means there is no need even to begin a discussion on holy books, holy scriptures. Suppose we raise this objection, then what is your reply? But Shankaracharya is cleverer than this man. So he says, no, it's not like that. Avidya adhyaropida dukkhitta brahma apoha arthatvad atmani pragrita sankhya purana brahma apohavat kalpita dukkha abhyupagamacha. It's an interesting language, long language. For us, it is a great entertainment to read this, It's a bit. So, he says, it's not like that. It is true that we are Brahman, we are the eternal bliss, that is true. But because of our absence of that realization, because for us, it's just an idea. We all imagine, we all think, we all define ourselves as these physical bodies, normally. Those who are a little more evolved may define themselves as physical mind-body complex with some intellect or mind and emotions and feelings and so on. So actually, there is a gradual evolution from a primitive self-definition of ourselves as mere physical bodies towards defining ourselves as a social animal, as human beings are considered to be social animals. And then we define ourselves as an intellectual, as a student of philosophy, as a mystic, as a painter, as an artist, as a musician. Like that, there is a gradual evolution. The primitive man in ancient times, he was living by hunting and by primitive activities. So he didn't have this concept of going for a higher music or mysticism or philosophy. He didn't worry about that. The only thing he was worried about was his own physical body and his survival. So he spent all his time in hunting animals and eating food. So, but as we evolve further, we imagine that we are not just physical entities, we are intellectual entities, we are psychological entities, we are, and at the highest level, spiritual entities. So, that is true that we are essentially Atman. Vivekananda's definition, religion is the definition, religion is the manifestation of divinity. Next word is important, already in man. It's already within us. It's not coming from outside. It's our true nature. So, but then, this is true. But then we are not, it's still only concept for us. It is only an idea for us. It is only a philosophical goal for us. It is not a reality. So, how to make this idea a reality in our life? For that, we have to remove all the wrong notions that we have about ourselves. So, what is the wrong notion? Because of avidya, because of our absence of this realization, we think we are these physical entities. When we get a medical notice or medical document from a doctor that we have got a serious health problem, we consider it's a terrible tragedy. And when we lose our job, we consider it's a big tragedy. When we lose money, we consider it's a big tragedy. When somebody dies, somebody departs, we consider this is a very big tragedy, disaster. Why? Because we define ourselves as other than Atman. Because of our inherent ignorance, our wrong ignorance. Where did this ignorance come from? There's a big discussion in Vedanta. Like, let's say, think of the rope-snake analogy. You mistake a rope for a snake because there is not enough light in that room. So you bring a light, you understand, and it is not a snake but only a rope. The question arises, from where did this misunderstanding emerge? The misunderstanding that it is not a rope but a snake. Actually, that misunderstanding has no origin. Why? Because the misunderstanding itself is not an absolute entity. It was a wrong notion that we developed because we have seen a snake somewhere else. That memory is there in our mental system. It is called adhyasa. Paratra, smriti rupa means. So, because we have seen this snake somewhere, so somewhere else, paratra. So, smriti rupa. So, as a kind of memory, we create this wrong notion within our own mind that this is a snake. We cannot say where it comes from, but we know that when the light comes, it goes away. Like that, when we realize that we are Atman, then the wrong notion just disappears. That's why Shankaracharya says elsewhere, Shastram tu ajnana nivartakam, jnana pravartakam. Scriptural study helps you to remove ignorance. Actually, it doesn't create anything. It doesn't bring light, bring knowledge. It just removes ignorance. And what is left after the ignorance is removed is knowledge only. When the semi-darkness, the darkness in the room disappears, then the reality expresses itself. Self-expresses itself that it is rope. Like that, Shankaracharya says, this self-imposed, this self-assumed wrong notion that we all entertain about ourselves, that I am the physical body, that's all what I have got. If I fall sick, it's a big disaster. So, and if I lose money, it is the end of whole existence. All these wrong notions are based on one problem. The problem is that we define ourselves as this physical body or mind or intellect, and we define ourselves as other than Atman. This problem should go. I mean, the semi-darkness should go, light should come to the room. When the light comes into the room, then the wrong notion that it is a snake goes away, and the fact that it is a rope, it self-expresses itself without any other, without the aid of anything else. So now here Shankaracharya uses a very interesting, a funny, humorous analogy. Prakrita Sankhya Purana Brahma Apohavat. So sometimes called Kalpita Sankhya Purana. What it means is, sometimes called Kalpita Sankhya Puranam Apohavat. What it means, So it actually a single statement. It refers to an interesting example they used in 8th century. A group of people, 10 people, were going to a place from one village to another village. So they had to cross a river. And after crossing the river, they wanted to make sure that all the 10 of them have crossed the river. So they began to count. 1, 2, 3, like that. So each person counted, but with one mistake. he did not include himself. Without counting himself, he counted all his friends. So only 9. So they were fighting and quarreling, worrying and crying and weeping. We were 10 when we left our home. Now we are only 9. I counted only 9. You counted 9. And he counted only 9. Because each person who counted, he did not count himself. So it's called Dashama Stomasi Nyaya. And a method of implying Dashama Stomasi means Dashama. So another wayfarer, maybe another villager, came to the scene and they asked them, what's the matter with you? Why are you counting again and again? Why are you worried? So they said, we were 10 of us when we left our village. Right now we find only 9. Then the newcomer told them, but you are not counting yourself. You count your friends and you say only 9, but you did not count yourself. So like that, this wrong notion that we are only 9, it is only an imagination. Kalpita, Prakrita Sankhya Purana Brahma Apohavad. Kalpita Sankhya Purana means, actually they were thinking of 10 people and each person was counting his friends, but he forgot to count himself, so he got only 9 and they were not sure where the 10th has gone, and the stranger had to come and tell them, no, you have to count yourself. That means if we actually, so there is no need for anyone else to come there for filling up the number. They were already 10. There was a wrong notion that there was only 9. And that's because the person did not count himself. So already there were 10, but somebody else had to show them, had to tell them, no, you have to count yourself. So in Vedanta, another person has to come, and a teacher have to come and tell you, then only you may need, you will be reminded of what you actually are. That's why Anadi Maya Supto Yatha Jiva Prabudhide, that's mentioned. We are in a kind of eternal spiritual sleep, spiritual slumber. A scripture can take you, a teacher can instruct you, but the effect of the instruction depends upon the level of our own spiritual fitness. This is a very, very important point that you can find here. And in fact, there is this statement, this idea is very forcefully expressed in another commentary, in another book, that is Mandukya Kariga, Mandukya Upanishad, Mandukya Kariga Bhashyam. There also says, when a newcomer came and told this person, you forgot to count himself, immediately he understood that he made a mistake in counting, in excluding himself, because he counted number of times. So he was ready to understand the meaning of the newcomer's advice. Dashamaha Tuam Asi, the 10th one is yourself. Immediately the group understood, oh, I am the 10th one. I excluded myself. This idea. And then when the stranger came and told him, you are the 10th one, there was no need for further instruction. That person immediately understood that they were 10. Like that, if a person is spiritually fit by practicing spiritual disciplines, reading, acquiring mental purity, and then if he reads these scriptures, immediately he will catch the real meaning. Actually, the effect of reading holy scriptures, whatever religion the scripture may belong to, any holy scripture, anything that is not talking about physical realities, physical entities, anything that needs another source to instruct you. For example, air and water and plane and ships, all these things anyone can learn if they go to a university, if they go to some specialized institutions, that person can learn all about these subjects related to physics or technology or science, whatever it is. But something about, let's say, afterlife, something, let's say, doctrine of karma, well, anyone can believe or disbelieve. But people sometimes feel that these things are more real than the laws of physics, because the laws of physics sometimes change. As you go deeper and deeper into the world of physics, and more discoveries emerge, and naturally, the discoveries we may have made some centuries ago, they get outdated or they get slightly modified. But the doctrine of karma, the doctrine of afterlife, all these things remain practically the same, because we don't get information about these subjects from books on science and technology. We need another source, and that source is the spiritual classics. Now, in the Mandukya Karika Bhashyam, there is an interesting statement. Shankaracharya says, any individual who spiritually fit and ready, and suppose a person has practiced a lot of meditation, a lot of karma yoga, and lives a very disciplined life, and spends his time, energy, everything for feeding his mind with higher ideas. If you tell him something about some spiritual subject, immediately he may catch it. And there is no need for him to get another kind of instruction. And the example is given in the commentaries. The example is from the rope snake analogy. Suppose somebody mistakes a rope in a semi-dark room for a snake, and if he brings light, then he realizes that it is not a snake, it is only a rope. The moment light is brought, then there is no need of another split second for the person to realize that it is not a snake, but a rope. So, once light is brought, then that very moment, a person can realize that it is not a snake as he feared, but it's only a rope. That statement comes in the Mandukya Karika. For example, he says, just read, because these are all important statements. Tada antaprakyatwadi pratisheda vijnana pramana samakalameva atmani anartha prapancha nivritti lakshanam phalam parisamaptamiti turiyadhigame pramanandaram sadhanandaram va namrugyam rajju sarpa vivega samakale iva rajjam sarpa nivritti phale sadi rajjadhigamasya. What it means is, actually this is a very interesting statement, which is a supporting statement for something that I mentioned earlier, Sabda Parokshavad. I already mentioned earlier. There are two schools in Vedanta with regard to how we make spiritual progress, how Vedantic ideas take roots in our mind. I give this example. One school is called Sabda Parokshavad, which belongs to the school of Vivarana, and Panchapadika was an important book written by Padmapada, who was Shankaracharya's disciple. It's a book on Brahma Sutras. And then Prakasha Mayedi wrote Panchapadika Vivarana. From the title of the book, this particular school of philosophy, Advaita philosophy, got the name Vivarana School. And then Vivarana Prameya Sangraha and all that. Later, number of other books were written on this subject. Now, according to them, if a person has already attained all the essential qualifications for Advaitic practice, like I call sadhana chatushtaya sampatti. I'm repeating what I repeated many times, but this sometimes required in spiritual discussions. So, nitya vastu viveka, ihamutra phalabhoga viraga, samadhi shakka sampatti, mumukshutvam, then sarvanam, mananam, nitidhyasanam, 7 disciplines. First, a person gets an idea what is real and what is unreal, then he upholds the real in the sense what is of higher value, what is of more permanent value. In our own life, this gradation, this evolution of values happens frequently. A child may consider a toy as something very important. A grown-up person may be looking for something more profound. And an aged person may have a higher, another concept of what really matters in life. So like that, there is a gradual evolution, a progression in our concept of values. Now, and the third discipline is Samadhi Sakha Sampatti. As a result of these spiritual disciplines, you develop these qualities of self-restraint, self-control, a maturity, the ability to endure physical problems without any complaint. All these higher qualities will develop. And also we develop a strong urge for spiritual enlightenment. Then we start feeding our mind with higher books. We start meditating on the meaning of what we read, and spiritually we begin to evolve. It is the 7 disciplines. A person, an individual, a spiritual seeker who is fully established in this discipline, if he just reads carefully any of these ideas, immediately he will catch it. This is what happens. Very often we need some lessons given by life alone to open our eyes. Frequently it happens. Very often we may casually read some higher books, Sermon on the Mount, the Upanishads, the Bhagavad Gita, the Vedas, Dhammapada, all these books we may read. But we may be interested intellectually. And we may discuss, we may write books. But then the ideas will not go very deep. But at some point what happens as we evolve further, these ideas become almost like physical realities in our life. For example, the fact that the world is mithya, all the empirical things are just peripheral, they are transient, they are non-eternal. Everyone understands intellectually, but still we won't be able to bring that conviction to the level of our common sense. But sometimes when some experiences happened, they go deeper, and at that time only we understand the true meaning of it. That's because we are not fully established in those essential qualifications. So Shankaracharya says, if you are fully established in those qualifications, then the moment you read it or you get an instruction from a teacher, immediately you understand the reality of it. It becomes a matter of experience. This is the Aparokshavada. Anyway, this is an important subject discussed in Vedanta. Those who are not so highly evolved, for them, they may have to read, they may have to think, they may discuss, they may take an intellectual interest in this, and slowly they may evolve. So, this is an important subject in Vedanta. Now, in another context, in the same text, Shankaracharya makes some statement that is about, that actually related to the Bimba Pratibimba concept, the idea, Pratibimbavada, the theory of reflection. I mean, Jiva, the individual Jiva, individual self is nothing but the mirror image, that is Pratibimba, the reflection on the mirror of Brahman, the reality. Because the mirror, the instrument called the mirror, and the clarity, the quality of the glass, all these are very, very important. Actually, this idea, this concept also came from Padmapada, the author of Panchapadika. And in way, of course, in the Brahma Sutras, there are Sutra Abhasa Eva, which actually can be called the genesis of this concept, Brahma Sutra Bhashya. Anyway, what it says is, Jiva is just a reflection, just a mere reflection. It's called a Pratibimba. And Brahman is the prototype, the Bimba. This is their view. And these ideas developed later, but its source is in Shankaracharya's own statement. So we can find here from some statements in the commentary literature. In the commentary literature, you find different concepts evolved in Vedantic tradition. So, analyzing the relationship between Brahman and Jiva and Jagat on the basis of the prototype Bimba and Pratibimba, the mirror image, the reflection, and again a similar analogy like a space within a pot, Ghadakasha, and space outside, Mahakasha. All these analogies developed later during the post-Shankarite times, but they do have their genesis in Shankaracharya's own commentary. Here, for example, Jala Suryadi Pratibimbavat Atma Praveshascha Pratibimbavat Vyakride Kari Upalabhyatvam. This you can find here. Sayava Iha Pravishtaha Tasrishtva Tadevanu Pravishat. You can find all these quotations are made from different books to explain that that Jiva is nothing but the reflection on a mirror of the prototype Bimba of Brahman. So after this, I want to take another very important concept which is linked to this Aham Brahmasmi concept. That comes for those of you who have got the book. You can refer to this book. It is a 3rd chapter, 4th Brahmana, 4th section, 1st and 2nd mantras. It's also, it has a very, very unique concept. What we are discussing till now, it comes from the 1st chapter, 4th Brahmana, and 10th mantra, which actually discusses this Aham Brahma, which actually contains Aham Brahmasmi Mahavakya. And now, a related state concept is then Vedanta. That's what we are going to discuss right now. It comes, as I mentioned earlier, it comes in the 3rd chapter, 4th Brahmana, 1st mantra. Now this is something very interesting actually. It's a very, very, I have got a, what do you call a statement here, which is, I have to mention a few related related remarks here. That is, in the 3rd chapter, there is continuous discussions between Yajnavalkya and a number of great Vedantic scholars who are all sages and saints of ancient times, of whom Gargi is the most learned debater, who debates with Yajnavalkya, who was the greatest Vedantin of those times. So you can find in each Brahmana one sage or one saint is introduced. Artabhaga, Bhujyu, Shasta, Kahola, Gargi comes, Aruni, Vidagdha, and so on. So all these are different names of ancient Vedic scholars, Vedantic scholars, who come to Yajnavalkya and put questions to him. As I mentioned, among them, the most celebrated debater who challenged Yajnavalkya frequently was Gargi, a learned lady scholar of those times. Now, the 4th Brahmanam is a discussion which includes a dialogue between one scholar, his name is Ushasta, and Yajnavalkya. So he is asking this question, he is asking a very, very interesting question here. So he asks, for example, Adhainam Ushasta Chakrayanaha Papracha Yajnavalkyedi Hovaja Yet sakshat aparokshat brahma ya atma sarvantraha tamme vyachakshva iti. This is the request comes from a great sage and a Vedic scholar, Ushasta. The subject of discussion is the concept of the immanence of God or immanence of the absolute reality, Atman. So, there is this statement called Yat Sakshat Aparokshat Brahma. Brahman is Sakshat Aparoksha. It is immediate and direct. This statement here. Now, Brahman is our own true nature. So, nothing can be more direct than Brahman. At the same time, it is not so obvious for those who have not realized it. It's our true nature, but we know it only as a concept at the most. So you cannot call it indirect. Paraksha means indirect or remote because it's our true nature. But we cannot really call it direct in the ordinary sense. You know, the opposite of paraksha is pratyaksha. Pratyaksha actually means something that is obvious, that we can see, we can relate, we can identify, we can objectify using our mind and the senses of perception. So I can see a chair, it is pratyaksha. I can see a wall, I can see a car, is pratyaksha. Direct perception. I can see it as a visual entity. My eyes and mind coming together can focus on a chair and I can see the chair. Now, Brahman is not direct like that. It's not pratyaksha. Why? Because it's our own true nature. So it is not remote. It's not paraksha. But it is not its opposite, pratyaksha. What is it? It is actually non-indirect. That's the only word you can use. It is non-indirect. Or we may call it direct. So, Yajnavalkya tells Ushasta, and the discussion continues, Yet Sakshat Aparokshat Brahma. This Brahman is actually, it is immediate, is direct. So the discussion begins like this. Ushastaha chakrayanaha papracha. He was the son of Chakra. So you can find the sage's father's name is mentioned. In Sanskrit, the word formation like that. So Ushasta, who is the son of Chakra, he put this question to Yajnavalkya. What is the question? Explain to me the true nature of Brahman, that is Yat Sakshat Aparokshat. It cannot be defined as remote because it is not paraksha, because it is our true nature. It can be called pratyaksha because it is not obvious to those who are not realized it. So this is aparoksha. You explain this to me. When Ushasta made this request to Yajnavalkya, you know Yajnavalkya's response. He said, this is yourself that is within all. The answer is, Esha te atma sarvantaraha. This is te atma, your atma, which is sarvantara, which is within all. So what is my true nature? Yajnavalkya is asking Yajnavalkya. You said this Atman is a true nature. Yajnavalkya's reply is this Atman, it is not pratyaksha, it is not paraksha, but it is sakshat aparoksha. It is within yourself, it is your own true nature. Then this Ushasta continues. So, you see, he says, Katamo Yajnavalkya Sarvantaraha. Like that. What is this self which is within all of us? The Yajnavalkya continues. You say, so he make this statement. In the next mantra, he makes it a more powerful statement. He says, Eshate Atma Sarvantaraha, Katamo Yajnavalkya Sarvantaraha, na drashtehe drashtaram pasyehi, na sutehe srotaram suniyaha, na matehe mantram manvithaha, na vijñatehe vijñataram vijaniyaha, eshate Atma Sarvantaraha, ataha anyit artam tadu ushastha chakrayanaha upararama. This the meaning. Now I shall explain. This needs a, the verbal translation may not explain everything. What Yajnavalkya says is this Atma, which is Sarvantaraha, which is within all of us. You cannot see that which is the witness of vision. So we see an object when our eyes and mind come together. But there is somebody who is actually the seer of the witness of this witness, this seer, the seer of the seer. So that's why. So you cannot see that which is the witness of vision. So you can, the Sanskrit mantra is this very important. You see, so he says, na drishthehe drashtaram pasyehi, na sutehe srotaram suniyah. So you cannot see the witness of the person who is seeing. Who is seeing? The eyes. But somebody else is the witness of the eyes, seeing its object. You cannot see him. That is important thing. You cannot see the seer of seen objects. Again, you cannot hear that which is the hearer of hearing. So, behind every activity that happens due to this collaboration of mind and the five senses of perception, like eyes, ears, sense of touch, sense of smell, and sense of taste. These are five senses of perception. They and mind together, they collaborate and they perceive different objects by seeing, by touching, by smelling, by hearing, and so on, by tasting, and so on. But there is somebody else behind all this. And you cannot hear him, you cannot touch him, you cannot see him, you cannot taste him, and he is beyond all that. And he is the eternal witness, he is the Sakshi. So here, the indweller, the Brahman within, Aham Brahmasmi, that Brahman within us, it is perceived and it is defined as the seer of objects, the hearer of objects, the one who touches the instrument, which perceives things by touching, like that. There is somebody behind one single divine spark. So this is the only way to explain the absolute reality. So from different levels you can establish a connecting link to this inexplicable, non-definable reality. So you can very easily see the sublime level of this analysis of the supreme intelligence, or you may call in ordinary monotheistic language, God. So you can see a gradual evolution from many to one, from external to internal, from outside to inner, you can see. As philosophy and spirituality evolves, this gradual evolution from many to one is inevitable. There is no doubt about it. And also this evolution from from external to internal. All the highest religious philosophical traditions naturally will terminate at a point when it transcends, it goes beyond philosophy. Philosophy and theology are required only so long as we don't realize the truth within ourselves. All the books don't become useless, but books become irrelevant. We transcend the need for books and doctrines and places. Again, remember, it is the highest philosophy mentioned in the Upanishad literature. We should never consider reading something and then it has become an experience for us. People make this mistake. The one most common blunder that frequently happens is people imagine this is some kind of an ideology that they can read, understand, and is wonderful, and they can imagine, they can practice it from that moment. It doesn't happen. You can practice socialism, communism, or capitalism. You can practice any day, any moment. You read Karl Marx, fine. You read great management specialists of modern American Europe, you can easily practice capitalism. Absolutely wonderful, no doubt about it. But spirituality is different. Spirituality becomes a fact only when we touch it physically, in the sense when it becomes a part of our own life and existence, when it becomes part of our emotional structure, emotional system. But at the same time, even to take an intellectual interest in this higher idea, that is, God sitting above the clouds, is perfectly okay. But as we evolve further, we find the God sitting above the clouds actually is present in all of us, not in one person, but in everything and everywhere as a divine entity. Yet Sakshat Aparakshat Brahma. That's the ultimate goal in spirituality and also in philosophy. So that's why Yajnavalkya says, no one can see the one who is the seer of all seers. No one can hear the one who is the hearer of all hearers. That means transcendence and omnipresence through immanence. Yet Sakshat Aparakshat Brahma. That divine spark is within all of us. So it is immanent. So through this immanence, it should be perceived as omnipresent and as transcendent. This is the idea that you find here. In fact, this discussion is very sublime. In fact, the discussion reaches its most sublime level when Gargi enters the scene. She is the most gifted and the most learned of the debaters who challenged Yajnavalkya in the court of Janaka. It's a very interesting discussion. Thank you. Now we can have interaction, I believe. We have plenty of time. Thank you. Namaskar. Yeah.
Hello, Swami.
Yeah.
My question is about Gargi. It seems that perhaps, well, when we see that Holy Mother had no education and that it was discouraged for Radu and so forth, and also Bharatiprana that was discouraged that she learned. So was it different in the age of the Upanishads that we had such a towering intellect who was so educated? Was the age of the Upanishads, were women as given the same opportunities as men to for scholarship?
You are right, if you're talking about the Vedic times, there were innumerable scholars during Vedic times. It's something very interesting. Unfortunately, not much research work is done. Indians were not very remarkable in historiography. In ancient civilization, they never bothered about. So there's a serious drawback of India's civilizational structure. They never gave much importance to history. So a person like Gargi, Maitreyi, there are many others, Vedanta, Pala, Ugrasta, and so on in the Vedic times. And they were very gifted, very learned Vedic scholars. In fact, Gargi, you can just give an example. Gargi comes to Janaka's court and she puts Janaka in a trap. So she's asking a question and she, look here Janaka, you said this is beyond definition, beyond explanation. Now, and she's putting a question on that. So if Janaka defines it or explains it, it will be a contradiction because Janaka, wrong word. If Yajnavalkya explains it, gives a long discourse on the subject, he'll be contradicting himself because he said this cannot be explained. It's beyond words. So Janaka cannot give, he can make this mistake frequently. Yajnavalkya, I'm talking about Yajnavalkya. Janaka is the big king, the great king, the philosopher king. Yajnavalkya is the great Vedic teacher of Janaka himself. And Yajnavalkya and Gargi, they are debating. So Gargi puts one question. What's the question? The question is linked to something that cannot be explained, that's beyond words, that cannot be explained in any scriptures. So Yajnavalkya was put in a trap. If he explains something that he himself said is beyond explanation, it will be contradiction. It will be a contradiction of what he said earlier. But if he doesn't do that, then he will be admitting that he is ignorant of it. So this is an important thing. If Yajnavalkya gives a long discourse on a subject which he himself asserted is beyond explanation and description, he will be contradicting his own statement, previous statement. And if we say, no, I cannot explain it, then Gargi can say, you don't know it. So what Yajnavalkya does is, in ancient times there was a discussion, some great sages were discussing this subject, I am telling you that. So there, you cannot say Yajnavalkya is ignorant, but he is actually explaining it. At the same time, you cannot say he is contradicting himself by explaining something which he himself said is beyond explanation. So, very, very interesting discussion you find here. So, you can find many such stories, many such incidents in Mahabharata. In all these debates, something that's very profound and very interesting and very, very relevant to our times is, there is not a little bit of fanaticism or exclusivism or saying that, this is the only way, if you don't, this is the only, nothing of the kind. In fact, that's the most sublime aspect of these teachings. Total absence of any kind of fanaticism, any kind of rigidity. They are discussing right in the presence of the king and in the presence, in an assembly of great scholars. So that's the most interesting part of it. So there were many women who were highly educated. In fact, there are statements in the Ayurvedic literature where it says that that ladies should be given initiation to Vedic studies when they are very young. It was a common practice.
Pranam Maharaj,
most
so you just what you just said, the concept of Brahman cannot be understood by human beings, but we have a very good intellectual explanation what Brahman is. So somebody must have written it up. I don't know whom, but some rishis must have, and they have explained it in a very nice way so that we can intellectually understand it. But it is all indirect proof.
Yeah.
It is like an electron in our modern day science electron, right? Nobody has seen it, but we have a model of it, and we can prove it with indirect methods.
Yes, precisely.
So who like so the scientists, I will call these people scientists actually, because they kind of inferred that there must be something like Brahman.
Yeah, that's true. One important aspect of any scientific fact is it is universal. It cannot be limited to one group, one nation, one society, one individual or anything. It is universal. In fact, one of Vivekananda's major contributions to Vedanta philosophy is he, in many of his lectures, he equated Vedanta to modern science. And I think the first statement that came in this area is from Vivekananda. He said, Vedantic truths are like scientific facts. It's universal. Electricity everywhere, all over the world, the same. So like that, with the religion, as Vedanta becomes universal truths when they are interpreted in the light of science. But you have to remember, the problem is, if you employ the tools of modern science to explain Vedanta beyond the limit, there's a problem. You cannot demonstrate Vedantic truths the way you can demonstrate things in a laboratory. At least, maybe electron you may not be able to see, but many of the scientific things can be demonstrated, verified. Actually, Vedanta also can be verified. I can tell you an example. Suppose you are facing a problem, fatigue or stress, and you meditate, and you feel okay. So a doctor will tell you, no, it's verified. He gives a medicine, the same effect. So you will say, he's right, and somebody who talked to you, who asked you to meditate is wrong. So the same effect. If effect is the same, cause must be identical. That's simple logic. But modern science sometimes becomes almost like the old fanatical religious doctrines. Modern science also becomes very fanatical. That's a problem. Science should not be fanatical. Vivekananda said, Vedantic truths should be accepted as scientific facts, as universal facts. That's the thing.
Yes, I mean, usually the scientists who are real scientists, they are not fanatic. The followers are usually fanatic.
That's true. No, you can't say an Einstein can never be a fanatic. Never. So there is one level where scientists also become philosophers. It's an important thing. When you define philosophy as a quest for truth, then science also becomes a kind of philosophy. In ancient times, science, mathematics, philosophy, they were all intertwined in the early days. A real scientist can never be fanatic. Yeah, impossible. And the greatest scientists of the world were not fanatics. And you have the example of Einstein, or many of the scientists who, I mentioned this guy, Oppenheimer, who took a lot of interest in Vedanta. Yeah.
So Ramakrishna was like a scientist in Vedanta.
He was practically, he was experimenting with different religious traditions, different ways of spiritual disciplines, and he was a pure scientist actually, running a laboratory, actually in a temple. He was a spiritual laboratory, really. Yes, that's true.
Swami, that raises a question for me, which is, I remember reading that that Socrates is often credited with the beginnings of the scientific method.
Yeah.
And then it was developed over time. But the idea that you could use questioning to get to truth, they credit him with that. And yet we see that even though he was a great saint, also he was a yogi, a Western. We see that Western philosophy, the mixture, like you said, of science and philosophy and so forth, it kept evolving more towards the material, empirical world. Whereas we see that in the Hindu culture, even though their science was even more developed, they developed the base 10 numbering system, which was far superior to the Western numbering system. We see that in the East, the Indians, they went from a more robust scientific and mathematical understanding the other direction into spiritual. Why is that? Why do we see such a, they started off better in mathematics and let go of it, whereas the Greeks and Western society went into materialism.
True.
Why do we see that difference?
Yeah. So, that's a very important question. If you look at India's history, for example, if you just go to Google mathematics schools, in fact, the state I'm coming from, Kerala, it is Kerala School of Mathematicians who lived in 14th century, 12th century. Number of mathematicians. And in fact, before Varahamihira, Bhaskara, Aryabhatta, many of India's space experiments are named after some of these ancient scientists, physicists, Bhaskara, Aryabhatta, and so on, all these great scientists who lived in India. So even the great mathematician, the wizard, the genius Ramanujam, according to some sources, he was using some ancient manuscripts for his astonishing mathematical skills. Great example in modern times. But your question is historically very important. Now, you find in India, in spite of many foreign invasions, a continuity in the intellectual enterprise, the scientific or spiritual or philosophical. In Western world, what really happened, in 5th century AD, St. Augustine of Hippo, he actually turned the history of Western philosophy upside down. What really happened, he especially his doctrine of the radical sinfulness of man, and then the Christian, the doctrinal rigidity that he put in place from 5th century onwards, that eclipsed philosophical inquiry in Western world. You can imagine, think of a man like Pythagoras or Anaxagoras, before Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, Philo, Porphyry, even the later Neoplatonists, right up to 2nd century, 3rd century AD. Then came Augustine in 5th century AD. And then you hear of Western philosophy only from with Kant in 18th century, you can imagine. So what happened? Theology imposed its supremacy, its kind of intellectual slavery on Western thinking for centuries, till it was it was revived in the 18th century with the coming of Kant, Hegel, and others. Of course, even before that there were some philosophers, but not so. Meister Eckhart was a great theologian, but because of his higher philosophy, his idea was rejected. He was a 13th century German philosopher, the author, the creator of the negative theology, for which he had to pay with his life most probably. So the point is, in India, that kind of rigidity, that kind of total enslavement of human mind did not happen in India. You can go to India, you see, there were Charvakas. In fact, the most cutthroat materialists were Indian Charvakas. All kinds of, I can quote you, they were criticizing people who were making rituals in temples. If by performing rituals your father can go to heaven, they make fun of you, There were certain practices in ancient India where they used to sacrifice animals to make sure that the ancestors will go to heaven. So the Charvakas wrote terrible things criticizing, making fun of them, ridiculing them. Indian materialism was highly developed. It is almost as ancient as Vedanta. Interesting thing, But people didn't bother about that. They questioned. See, a man like Buddha. Do you think he would have survived in medieval Europe? No. He questioned everything that is sacred in Hinduism. And all the Hindu learned Vedic scholars flocked to him. Vasubandhu, Dharmakirti, Dingnaga, even the Nagarjuna, they're all learned Vedic Pandits who became Buddhist monks and wrote great books on Buddhism. So this happened in India, but at least religion could not terrorize philosophy in India to the extent it happened in Europe. This is a tragedy. That's why, see, if you can place, when you when you read about a man like Socrates, you can imagine Socrates sitting on the banks of river Ganga, or maybe somewhere in the Himalayan hermitages with his eyes closed, meditating. The same man you find in ancient Athens, in Greece. Just imagine. A man like Socrates is not different from some ancient rishis sitting on the banks of river Ganga, meditating on the Himalayas. This is what. So, but then it came to an end with Neoplatonism. After Neoplatonism, there was no blossoming of philosophy in Europe. And philosophy took some kind of a, as you mentioned, very materialistic turn. Actually, utilitarianism, J.S. Mill and Hume and Locke, you can imagine. Actually, it looked almost childish if you read from our perspective. Imagine, yeah, okay. The maximum.
I think you're right.
See, J.S. Mill says the value of anything should be judged to the extent it brings joy and happiness and pleasure to the maximum number of people. You can imagine. So that kind of, of course, Indian Charvakas, Indian materialists were as bohemian as J.S. Mill or anyone else. Okay, thank you, Christian. Yeah.
I think you're right. I think probably Shankara would have been crucified if he were in the West.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah, that's true. That is true. That's true. Yeah.
And J.S. Mill might have put ice cream on the altar. Thank you, Maharaj. I would like to ask a question. I'm curious about the post-Shankarite schools that you touched upon, the Bhamati school and the Vivarana school.
Yeah.
And these post-Shankarite disciples, Vajaspati Misra and Padmapada,
yeah.
I'm wondering if they essentially agreed that the immanence of Brahman, that their interpretation of the Mahavakya is that it explains both Vidya and Avidya, that both of them are, that although these philosophers had some differences and these schools have some differences, when it comes to this, they agree? Is that correct?
Yeah, they agreed on all these points. The main point of disagreement was whether a spiritual seeker can immediately reach the experience level if he just listens to the great statements, Mahavakyas, in the Upanishads. Okay. Now, that again, in a way, their disagreement was mostly a polemical, just a dialectical disagreement. Because in those days, the Pandits used to argue and write books and discuss. But really, in reality, that disagreement was without much substance. Because it's called a Prasankhya Vada, because Prasankhya actually means dhyana abhyasa, long meditative practices, karma yoga, disciplines. Every day you read. It's called Sravanavarti. Every day you should read, you should listen, meditate, and then practice puja, karma yoga, like that. So this should continue for a very long time. Then only these Mahavakyas, the truth of Mahavakyas, will become a matter of experience to you. But then, in reality, this is needed, this is required only for a person who has not attained complete fitness for listening to Mahavakya. Sadhana, Sadushtaya Sambhati, for disciplines, for qualification for Vedanta. Those who are not fully established in these disciplines, the fundamental qualifications, they will have to read scriptures every day, meditate on the meaning of scriptures, then practice puja, then meditation, and after a long time, maybe at the end of their life, maybe after some life cycles, this may become a matter of experience to them. But those who are fully fit, fully qualified, for them, it won't take a long time. It is called Sabda Parokshavaja. You just Vivarana school. Any question is clear? I don't know.
Yes, you made that very clear. Thank you.
Clear?
Very clear. Thank you.
Yeah.
Swamiji, I was just reminded from your last comment about Nisargadatta Maharaj. When I was reading about him, it said that even though he was not a very learned or a literate person, he heard from his guru, Siddheshwar Maharaj, that the self is in you, and he had such immense faith in his guru that's what did it for him. I mean, he did not go through all these disciplines. So we do have these odd cases of people who seem to have followed a completely different model.
In fact, I discussed this subject in my Yoga Sutra lectures. So, if you read the Yoga Sutra, you will understand. You see, many of the samskaras are many of these samskaras are the karmasya level, means at the deeper layers of the human mental system. Many samskaras. On the surface, there are some samskaras. For a spiritual seeker like the one you mentioned, in his case, he had a lot of spiritual samskaras in his mental system. Just tiny, a thin layer of negative samskaras, worldly samskaras, tendencies on the top. So when he got his instruction, all the positive samskaras from the deeper layers suddenly come to the surface and it connected. This is what happens. And for many spiritual seekers, they may have a lot of good samskaras at the top layer and many negative samskaras at the deeper layer. They may read, again the negative samskaras from the deeper layers will come to the surface and will disturb it. So people feel a lot of conflicts in their spiritual life. But if they continue striving again and again, they will be accumulating and generating more and more positive samskaras. So, and eventually they move forward. In fact, in Buddha's Jataka tales, rebirth stories, you can find, in each life cycle, Buddha, the Bodhisattva, he had some unique quality about him, something absolutely wonderful. But then gradually, and there was also some little problem, but gradually in his last birth, when he was born as Siddhartha, the son of Suddhodana, the king of Lumbini, Nepal. That was his last life, and he became a Buddha. So what happened? Then he eventually became Buddha. But when he meditated under the Bodhi tree, all these deeper samskaras from previous life cycles emerged in his mind. He connected and then de-identified, detached himself from those samskaras. So they became null and void, they become practically dagdha bijavad, mean like burned seeds. They became non-functional, dysfunctional. So this is a very important point. But there is one area of difference between Vedanta and Yoga. In Vedanta, once you are ready for it, fully qualified, when you hear this, that very moment, all this go, all this disappear. You become identified with that. In Yoga method is a long drawn process. So of course there are many areas of conflict between Yoga and Vedanta, but there are many areas in which the ideas mentioned in Patanjali's system are very much accepted in Vedanta philosophy. Thank you for the question. Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Tat Sat Sri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu.